Hey gang, what's good? Welcome to another Morrowind Mechanics guide. This time we're checking out sneaking and pickpocketing. As always, I've got timestamps in the description if you'd like to skip around. Let's begin with the basics and exactly how we can use and advance these skills. In Morrowind, the sneak skill actually encompasses both sneaking and pickpocketing. There's two ways to advance our skill level, either by successfully eluding NPCs, which advances your sneak by 0.25, or successfully pickpocketing, which advances your sneak by 2. In combat, sneaking is used to achieve critical strikes. There are no random critical hits in Morrowind, just sneak attack crits. If you're using a ranged weapon, you get a 1.5 times multiplier, and if you're using a melee weapon, you get a whopping 4 times multiplier. If you're using ranged weapons, you should be trying to get sneak attacks as often as possible. Forewarning though, as this can be a little confusing, for whatever reason, you never get an on-screen notification for ranged critical hits like you do the melee versions. The lack of feedback sucks, but rest assured, ranged sneak attacks do deal the extra damage. I tested this myself extensively. Unfortunately though, sneak attacks don't offer any bonus damage to magical attacks. The act of sneaking itself is pretty simple. By default, on the PC version, you must hold down your sneak key to continue sneaking, but many mods, including the unofficial Morrowind Code Patch, changed this to allow sneak toggling, which you can do on the console version. Anyways, upon activating your sneak mode, you may see a small icon appear in the bottom left of your HUD. This indicates that your character is currently undetected. If you're within the range of an NPC's detection radius, and this icon appears, you'll be advancing your sneak skill. Every 5 seconds, NPCs perform a detection check. It's worth noting that this check occurs even when you're not sneaking. So, for example, you could just happen to enter stealth right before a stealth check occurs. Going undetected can be difficult to achieve at lower levels, but with the help of a chameleon effect, or invisibility effect, sneaking becomes a cinch. Let's take a look at the formulae involved in sneaking and get a better understanding of it. Each stealth check performed by NPCs essentially measures up your own stealth rating against said NPC's perception rating through subtracting one formula from another. Mind you that the game doesn't technically include terms like stealth rating or perception rating, we're just using them to help better understand what we're looking at here. Also remember that this stealth check is performed by every NPC within detection range of you, so you could have tons of these suckers going off at any time. Anyways, here's the formula used to determine your current stealth rating. From this, we can gather a few things. Your sneak skill is essentially your base for your stealth rating. From here, every 5 points of agility or 10 points of luck increases your stealth rating further by 1. Next, our stealth rating is impacted by a couple modifiers. First is a distance modifier. Basically, the further you are from an entity, the more stealthy you'll be. The second modifier is the all too familiar fatigue modifier. Depending on your fatigue gauge's current level, this can be as high as a 1.25 modifier or as low as an 0.75 modifier. Finally, chameleon or invisibility contribute a surprisingly massive amount to your stealth rating. Chameleon contributes whatever the effect's magnitude is, and invisibility always contributes 100, since, for our purposes here, it's a 100 magnitude chameleon effect. Keep in mind that these spell effects aren't subjected to the distance or fatigue modifiers. They can be invaluable if your character has a low sneak level. Now, let's move on to the formula used to calculate our opponent's perception rating. This is very similar to the previous formula, only it uses our opponent's stats instead. There's 2 exceptions, however. The first is that blind effects reduce the opponent's perception rating, as you might expect. The second is that instead of a distance modifier, there's a direction modifier. This is actually very simple. Imagine a circle around the hitbox of every NPC. If your own hitbox is anywhere within a 180-degree angle in front of the NPC, then their perception rating is improved with a 1.5 times direction modifier. However, if you're behind them within that other 180-degree angle, then their perception rating against you is diminished with an 0.5 direction modifier. Keep in mind that Morrowind sometimes has questionable hitboxes if you aren't using any mods that fix them. So sneaking slightly behind and to the side of an NPC, a small portion of your character may actually still be registered as being in front of the NPCs forward-facing 180 degrees. Now that we know how sneaking functions, let's move on to pickpocketing. It goes hand in hand with it. But unfortunately, pickpocketing is a complete mess with multiple conflicting sources of information. The popular mod, the Morrowind Code Patch, which we went over just a little bit ago, makes many changes to pickpocketing, but I wasn't able to find anywhere in which the authors of the mod disclosed exactly what their mod changes. So naturally, take the information here, especially the specifics, with a grain of salt, and if you happen to have anything to add, feel free to do so in the comments. Anyways, pickpocketing is initiated by sneaking up to an NPC and activating them as you would normally if you wanted to speak to them. As soon as you do this, a couple of things happen. First, there's a detection check. This actually happens whenever you enter and leave the pickpocketing inventory interface. On screen now are the specifics of these two entering and exiting checks. Now, as I said earlier, the specifics are actually a little unclear, so take it with a grain of salt. Anyways, it seems as though a number is randomly generated between 1 and 100. If your own sneak level is greater than the sum of this random number and your victim's sneak level, then you are undetected. When you open the pickpocketing interface, you may also notice that an NPC could be lacking items that you know for a fact he or she has on their person. Well, for each item stack in their inventory, another 1 out of 100 roll is performed. If that roll is less than or equal to your own sneak level, then the corresponding item will be visible to you in the pickpocketing interface. This actually seems pretty concrete and consistent across all sources I've found. Anyways, let's now move on to the more complex part. Your chances for actually successfully pickpocketing a specific item. On screen now are the various formulae used in the unmodded version of the game. Right there at the T variable is where things get kind of out of hand. Because the Y variable accounts for the value of a stack of items, you'll almost always be using the minimum pickpocket chance of just 5% if you try to pickpocket something that's over 100 gold in value. As we went over earlier, the Morrowind Code Patch attempts to address this by rewriting the formula to seemingly disregard item value in favor of item weight. Like I said, I haven't seen anywhere this pickpocketing overhaul is disclosed fully. I can only assume that here, where value factors into the formula, weight is instead factored in some way. So essentially, without the code patch, you'll have a hard time pickpocketing high-value things like jewelry. But with the code patch, you'll instead have a hard time pickpocketing high-weight things like weapons or armor. I feel like we can safely assume that the overhaul still, in some way, accounts for our sneak level and attributes. So increasing our sneak level, agility, and luck should all improve our odds at pickpocketing, even if we're using the unofficial Morrowind Code Patch. Mind you, that sneak levels in far excess of 100 are likely going to be necessary to pickpocket high value or high weight items, depending on what version of the pickpocket formula you've got running in your game. Alright folks, that covers everything I can think of about sneaking and pickpocketing specifically. As I said before, if you happen to come across something definitive, totally feel free to drop a comment. We're all in this together. As always, be sure to check out my other Morrowind guide videos, especially if you're new to the game. There's plenty to learn about it. And give a look at my weekly Morrowind playthrough if you're into those sorts of videos. Thanks again for watching. Peace.